Okay, so let's unpack this. Have you ever paused to consider what's really in the everyday products you interact with? The flame retardants in your couch, maybe the plastics in your kitchenware, or, even the air circulating through your office building. What if these constant, often unseen exposures were silently impacting something as fundamental as reproductive health for you, or maybe for future generations? Today, we're taking a deep dive into precisely that: how widespread exposure to environmental chemicals can affect our reproductive and developmental health. But maybe more importantly, we're going to explore a groundbreaking new methodology, one that aims to empower you and healthcare professionals to, well, navigate this incredibly complex landscape.
That's a really crucial point. For this deep dive, we're drawing insights from a pivotal paper in Health Affairs. It's titled An Evidence-Based Medicine Methodology to Bridge the Gap Between Clinical and Environmental Health Sciences by Tracey J. Woodruff, Patrice Sutton, and the Navigation Guidework Group. And their core mission, just as you highlighted, is to bridge this significant chasm, this gap between what environmental scientists know about these chemicals and what clinicians and patients can practically use to make informed health decisions.
And what they found is truly eye-opening, isn't it? The sources indicate that virtually everyone in the United States is constantly exposed to just a myriad of toxic chemicals found in our homes, our communities, and our workplaces. We're talking about substances like polybrominated diphenyl ethers, PBDEs. Those are flame retardants common in furniture, computer.
All right, and they can leach out into your environment.
Or phthalates, often found in common plastics, known for disrupting our hormones. And even persistent organochlorine pesticides like DDT, chemicals designed decades ago, still circulating.
Still around, still accumulating in our bodies. And the impact of these chemicals is not trivial. Studies show they alter the endocrine, neurological, and other biological systems. To put that simply, they can interfere with our hormone systems, brain function, other vital bodily processes. And the concern is particularly heightened when these exposures happen during critical periods of growth and development, in utero and during infancy, childhood, and adolescence.
That makes sense. That's when the body is undergoing such rapid, sensitive development and is most vulnerable to lasting effects.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe concerning. The fact that virtually all pregnant women in the United States have detectable levels of a wide range of these chemicals in their bodies. We're talking about substances like lead, mercury, toluene, perchlorate, bisphenol A, BPA, and various phthalates, pesticides, PFCs, PCBs. It's a long list.
It really is. It just underscores how pervasive these exposures are.
Yeah.
And it's not just about detection. Many of these levels are at levels associated with adverse health outcomes in human studies. But here's the profound challenge. The reproductive and other potential health impacts of daily and simultaneous exposure to environmental chemicals has not been studied.
Yeah.
We simply don't have a clear picture of the long-term cumulative effects of this constant chemical cocktail we're all swimming in.
Right.
And this isn't just some academic blind spot. It's a fundamental gap in how we assess chemical safety.
Right.
It leaves us in an ongoing, uncontrolled experiment, really, with the entire population.
So given the sheer scale and complexity of this problem, it raises a critical question. Why aren't doctors routinely guiding patients on how to, mitigate these environmental risks? What's standing in the way for healthcare professionals?
Well, the biggest hurdle seems to be that the relevant scientific evidence is, well, it's voluminous, of variable quality, and largely unfamiliar to health professionals caring for people of childbearing age.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to find timely, evidence-based advice when there's no single trusted, ready reference or compendium to synthesize all this vast and often conflicting information.
That sounds impossible in a clinical setting.
Right. Clinicians are left trying to piece together insights from all these different sources, which is just not practical in a busy clinic.
Although it's worth noting that it's not a complete void, is it? There have been significant efforts in environmental health, particularly in pediatrics. The American Academy of Pediatrics, for instance, has had an environmental health committee for over 50 years.
That's true.
And the CDC and EPA support specialized pediatric environmental health units. So the awareness and expertise do exist in certain specialized areas.
They do.
But it sounds like this vital knowledge really needs to be expanded and, I guess, seamlessly integrated into general reproductive health on a much broader scale.
Exactly. And if you look at it from the patient's perspective, many people are intensely and justifiably interested in how environmental factors impact their pregnancy and their future children's health. Yet they're often unaware that their home, workplace, and community environments may influence their fertility and their future children's health.
So there's a knowledge gap on both
A
sides.
significant one.
Hmm.
Not just for clinicians, but for individuals trying to protect themselves and their families.
This brings us to a much broader principle that underpins modern medicine: the timely incorporation of scientific evidence into clinical care to improve health outcomes. It's the very foundation of evidence-based practice, right?
It absolutely is. If we trace the history of evidence-based medicine, or EBM, you see this deliberate move away from relying only on expert opinions toward more rigorous, systematic approaches. There's a powerful example from Elliot Antman and his colleagues. They compared expert recommendations for treating heart attacks, myocardial infarction against systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials. And their research really documented the lack of timely incorporation of experimental evidence into expert-based recommendations.
What did that mean practically?
It revealed that some highly effective therapies were being missed, while some ineffective ones were still being recommended based on older opinions. It really highlighted the need for a more structured approach.
Okay, so that research became a major catalyst then. It drove this push for more rigorous methodologies, eventually leading to the widely adopted grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation system, the GREED system.
Yes, and GRADE is incredibly robust. It systematically rates the quality of evidence and grades the strength of the recommendations. It's now a gold standard,
Hmm.
adopted by over 50 organizations globally. The World Health Organization, AHRQ, the CDC.
Wow.
It truly revolutionized how we translate scientific findings into clinical practice.
So it's a powerful tool, no doubt. But, and here's the twist, it's not a silver bullet, particularly when you try to apply it to environmental health science. It seems to have some distinct limitations there.
Right. And understanding these differences is crucial. First, there are what the paper calls evidence stream differences. GRADE primarily evaluates human experimental and observational evidence. It kind of operates on the assumption that in vitro lab tests and in vivo animal studies data have already been rigorously reviewed and accounted for by regulators.
Like for pharmaceuticals before they hit the market.
Exactly, before they enter the market. But the problem with environmental chemicals is that the vast majority have entered the marketplace without comprehensive and standardized information on their reproductive or other chronic toxicities.
So we're exposed first, and the data comes later, maybe.
Often much later, if at all. We're living with them, and the safety picture is often incomplete. Second, there are decision context differences.
Right.
GRADE is designed for clinical risk-benefit decisions, like prescribing a drug where a potential benefit might outweigh known risks.
Makes sense.
But for environmental chemicals, the benefits are mostly not directed toward improving health. You're not, consuming a chemical from your couch to get better.
Right.
And here's a significant ethical challenge. Randomized controlled trials on environmental contaminants are virtually precluded because of ethical considerations.
Yeah, you can't ethically ask people to be exposed to something potentially harmful just for a study.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You can't ask a group to live in a house with dangerous flame retardants just to see what happens. So the scientific process for environmental health has to operate under a very different set of rules than, say, a drug trial.
Okay. So given these pretty significant challenges with applying traditional EBM and GRADE to environmental health, it's clear that a new approach was needed. And that's exactly what this remarkable group of experts set out to create. To bridge this very specific gap between clinical and environmental health sciences, a groundbreaking new methodology was born, the Navigation Guide. And this wasn't some small academic thing, it was the product of a year-long collaboration. 22 clinical practitioners, environmental health scientists.
From government, non-government organizations across the U.S. and Europe, a really broad coalition.
So what's its foundation? How does it build on what came before?
Well, the Navigation Guide essentially builds upon GRADE. It proceeds from GRADE, but accounts for the differences in evidence and decision context that we've just been talking about. It makes it perfectly tailored for the specific nuances and challenges of environmental health.
Okay, let's dive into how this powerful tool actually works then. How does it help us sort through this incredibly complex information and arrive at, well, actionable advice?
It involves 4 systematic steps. The first is pretty foundational. Specify the study question. This means framing a precise, answerable question that's directly relevant to healthcare decision makers. Something like, does maternal exposure to perfluorooctane sulfonate affect fetal growth? Very specific.
Got it. Clear question first.
Then the second step is to select the evidence. This involves conducting a rigorous, systematic search for all relevant published and unpublished evidence. And crucially, it doesn't just rely on those pre-existing lists of toxicants, which can sometimes be inconsistent or, not very transparent about how they were made.
So it starts fresh each time.
It starts from scratch to ensure a truly comprehensive and unbiased review of everything that's out there. Now, the third step, rate the evidence. This is where it really adapts grade for environmental health. It systematically rates the quality of evidence, not just from human studies, but also from those critical studies of laboratory animals and other non-human streams of evidence. The animal studies, the lab tests that are so vital for understanding environmental chemicals. All of these different evidence streams are then integrated into one of 5 clear statements about the overall strength of the evidence.
Okay, what are those?
The categories are known to be toxic, probably toxic, possibly toxic, not classifiable or probably not toxic, specifically to reproductive or developmental health. It gives a clear, categorized understanding of the risk level based on all the science.
But that sounds much clearer than just a pile of studies.
It aims to be. And finally, the fourth step is to grade the strength of the recommendations. Here, the guide takes that synthesized evidence of toxicity and integrates it with crucial practical considerations. Things like information about the level of exposure, how much are people actually encountering, the availability of a less toxic alternative, can you switch to something safer? And importantly, patients' values and preferences.
So it brings the patient into the decision too.
Absolutely. This holistic approach results in a concise, evidence-based recommendation for prevention, specifying whether an action is strongly recommended or maybe just discretionary.
So the real power here is that this whole process translates incredibly complex, multifaceted scientific data into a concrete, actionable recommendation for prevention. It could be something as clear-cut as chemical X is known to be toxic to reproductive health and doing X, Y, or Z to prevent exposure is strongly recommended. It takes that overwhelming science and makes it practical.
That's exactly the goal. It aims to cut through the noise.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of methodology, it seems like it has enormous potential to reduce harm and presumably the associated health costs linked to chemical exposures.
Definitely. It provides a standardized, transparent way for professional societies, healthcare organizations, government agencies, and other potential guideline developers to create consistent and timely recommendations. Recommendations designed to improve health outcomes for patients and ultimately for whole populations. It's about creating a much clearer path from science to safety.
You know, it brings to mind a powerful historical parallel. Think about the thalidomide tragedy back in the 1950s and 60s. That devastating event where a drug given to pregnant women caused such severe birth defects led directly to strengthened regulatory oversight of prescription drugs globally.
The huge turning point.
Right. It was this brutal lesson that forced us to completely rethink how we test and improve medications. It kind of feels like we might be at a similar inflection point now for environmental chemicals. These advances in toxicity testing and our growing understanding of environmental risks. The paper suggests they're likely to result in important changes in the amount, type, and availability of data on chemical toxicity.
I think that's a fair comparison. And looking to the future, the rapid evolution of these evidence streams new types of data. Faster testing methods means tools like the navigation guide will need constant review to stay current and effective. Plus, think about the exponential growth of data, especially with the expanding use of electronic health records.
Right, EHRs.
They could greatly accelerate the creation of knowledge about the impact of the environment on human health. We could potentially link exposures and outcomes much more efficiently.
That raises a big question, though.
It does. How quickly can we translate this burgeoning data, this flood of new information, into actionable prevention that truly protects public health? That's the challenge ahead.
So today, we've unpacked how a powerful new framework, the navigation guide, is helping to demystify complex environmental health science. The goal is making it actionable for you and your healthcare providers.
Yeah, this deep dive really highlights that while the world of environmental chemicals can feel overwhelming, maybe even scary, robust methodologies like the navigation guide are actively being developed. They're tools to help us sort through the noise and make sense of it all. So what does this mean for your own choices, maybe as a consumer, or for how you approach conversations with your doctor about health and the environment? Perhaps it just prompts you to think a bit more critically about the products you bring into your home, or maybe to ask more questions about environmental health issues in your community and your workplace.
The goal, really, is not just to be informed, but to be empowered to make better decisions for yourself and your family. Until next time, keep diving deep.